My name is Rafael Bejar. I am Rafa for short, so please call me Rafa. I am Director of Outreach for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And if you are looking for the outreach panel, well, you're in the right place. So today we're going to do something a little bit different, something that really hasn't been done in any of the policy orientations before. It's going to be the first time that we are actually not going to speak about the intricacies of policy in this particular panel. We are, with my friends and colleagues here, we're going to embark a little journey, so to speak, on exploring the mysteries of outreach and how to turn relationships into reform. Obviously, we're all about freedom and promoting that liberty, but there are certain challenges that happen with this kind of work. And although it's not as esoteric and mysterious as many would like to believe, it's not rocket science, it is a little bit challenging. And it requires two very elusive qualities. One of them is common sense, and that's a very lucrative commodity amongst many. And the other one is perseverance. And if you're in this field for any length of time, you really have to have both. And we are very honored to have some very distinguished panelists with us today. As a matter of fact, we have hands down the most diversified panel of any of the panels that we've ever had in policy orientation. So I really expect to have a really good discussion, and we are looking to make sure that you all enjoy your experience at policy orientation as we're building up to what promises to be a very exciting and productive legislative session. And I know that we have folks from all across the state and are interested in learning a little bit more of how this work is done. Since we're not really talking about any one specific issue, although some issues may come up, policy issues may come up, I really wanted to give the opportunity for the panelists that are here to have a little bit more liberty and leeway to explain exactly their organizations and what they do, how they do it, and then we can go into a little conversation from there. So with that, I would like to introduce our distinguished panel. And first, I'd like to present to y'all a good friend of mine, Mr. Jorge Martinez. Mr. Martinez is a coalitions director for the state of Texas at the LIBRE initiative and the Americans for Prosperity. In 2015, he was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to the Texas Physician Assistant Board and serves on the Ethics and Disciplinary Committee. He serves as chairman of the Citizen Advisory Committee in the city of Mission. He's a graduate of California State University in Fresno, so he's a refugee. So, where he received the Bachelor of Arts in Communication. While there, he became the founding president of Alpha Gamma Omega, a Christ-centered fraternity, and later earned his Master's of Public Administration in California Baptist University. So George has a lot to tell us. He's a good friend. He used to work with me when I was over at the LIBRE Initiative before coming over to the foundation. So very excited to hear from him. Next, we're very honored to have the lioness of Texas is JoAnn Fleming. So I know most of you know JoAnn, and I know that because it took her literally 40 minutes to get from the escalator to get to the meeting room. So And I think that some of our electeds are probably envious of having that kind of popularity. So JoAnn is Executive Director, as you all know, of Grassroots America, We the People PAC, the largest volunteer-led constitutional conservative organization in Texas. Served as a 3-time chair of Texas Legislature's Tea Party Caucus Advisory Committee, and chaired by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's, also chaired Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's Grassroots Advisory Board for the 84th legislative session, and currently is an advisor to the Texas House Freedom Caucus, and has earned the title of local government subject matter expert on everything, but by having actively served on 22 local government boards, task forces, and committees. So please welcome JoAnn Fleming. The next person I'm going to introduce, I really haven't known him very long, but I do consider him as a brother, brother in the field of doing outreach, and he and I met in Tyler, and we really clicked, and he's a great guy, and Mr. R.W. Bray. He served as the engagement director for Ted Cruz Senate campaign and served as the Black Engagement Director for the Republican Party of Texas and co-founder of the MLK Association of Texas, of which he now holds the office of President of the Houston chapter. Currently writing his first book, addressing the importance of Republican engagement across the nation, and he joined the Texas Air National Guard in 2009 and was accepted into the United States JAG Corps. Served as a law office manager in the 147th Reconnaissance Wing in Ellington Field, and also served as vice president of the Houston Young Republicans and MLK Association of Texas vice president. So please welcome Mr. R.W. Bray. So please, this is really meant to be a conversation, and I'm going to allow the the panelists to tell them a little bit about their organizations, and keep your questions in mind, because we really want to get to all of them, because we know that for some of you that this may be something that you want a little bit more information on. We want to make sure that since we've all been working in the field for a very long time, we want to try to make this as clear as possible, because sometimes when people speak about outreach, they speak about it, as I was alluding to, in very mysterious, esoteric ways, and it's really not all about that. And it really does just requires a little bit of common sense and perseverance. And we want to make sure that that you all leave with that. That's one of the takeaways that we want to achieve here today. So with that, George, let me start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do as Coalitions Director for the LIBRE initiative?
Thank you, Rafa. And first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Jorge Martinez, and as most of you all know, I am a refugee of California. And I'm based out of Mission, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. I represent the LIBRE initiative, and our mission is to inform the U.S. Hispanic community of the principles and values of a free and open society, which encompasses free enterprise, property rights, the rule of law, sound money supply. And we do that by equipping the Hispanic community with the tools they need so that they can thrive and contribute to a prosperous America. How do we do that? Well, throughout the country, and especially here in the state of Texas, we do things like having English as a second language courses for the Hispanic community. A third of Hispanics only speak English. A third of Hispanics only speak Spanish, and the other third speak both. So there's a third of them that have a barrier to an opportunity that we're trying to break down. And one of our main goals is to break down those barriers that are in the way, whether they're internal or external. And actually, in the Valley, we're getting ready to launch our first ESL classes there with our team in the Valley, with 17 parents from a charter school that we've partnered with over years, that we have built a relationship with them. And in Houston, we've done the same thing. We started last summer where we had something like 55, I think it was the last number, of individuals where we were teaching them English as a second language. Now, every region is different. Not everyone's going to do that. In El Paso, we've done things like financial literacy courses. Why? It's because it's important to know how to budget for your expenses, how to live beneath your means. So we've partnered with people who are certified with Dave Ramsey because we want people to get out of debt and get ahead. And those are the things we are doing in the community. And here in Austin, we've partnered with tech companies like Google, Facebook, Indeed, Square, because our field team here realized that there was Hispanic businesses that weren't utilizing technology, and that they could find a way to create an extra revenue or earn more business by utilizing these technologies. So we created a pro bono day in partnership with these organizations, and we hope to continue doing this type of outreach that will hopefully break down those barriers for individuals. And in 2016, we merged with Americans for Prosperity and Concerned Veterans for America, and together we are a network where we want to see people thrive and break down those barriers where there's mutual benefit for each and every one of us. In the case of engagement and volunteers, the individual is giving us their time. They are passionate about whatever the policy issue may be. And as a person who needs volunteers to be successful in our field, you need to be passionate about it as well. And if not, they're going to see it right through you that you're there and you don't really care. So that's one thing where we've been successful is being passionate, really truly caring about our community. We want us to all be productive members of society. And that's why we are out there, because in 2011 when we founded, by our president, Daniel Garza, who was a former George W. Bush White House staffer, we found that there were no other organizations that were promoting these principles of free markets and economic freedom. But there was a ton on the other side. So that's when we came up with this, and we've grown since then. We have thousands and thousands of volunteers and activists, and we couldn't have done it without them to where we are at today. Thank you.
George, thank you. And we'll certainly get back to you. JoAnn, tell us about the juggernaut that is Grassroots America.
Well, thank you so much, Rafa. I really appreciate TPPF inviting me back. I've served on some policy panels before, but this is indeed a treat, and I see so many familiar faces out there, people that I've worked with over the last 10 years. So just a little background how I came to do this. I've been a volunteer, full-time volunteer activist, conservative activist in Texas for 27 years. I am a recovering elected official. I'm a self-retired county commissioner from Smith County, and I have been successful in getting some good people elected to office locally and holding them accountable. So one of the things that I'd like to say is Grassroots America is celebrating, next month will celebrate its 10th anniversary. And in 10 years, thank you so much. And in 10 years, we have taken, with God's blessing, as I like to tell people, Rafa, anything good we've done, we give the Lord the credit, and all the screw-ups are mine.
Amen.
And there are some, and I have friends that point them out to me. But anyway, in 10 years' time, we have gone from a local organization to a statewide organization, and as Rafa said, we're the largest all-volunteer-led constitutional conservative organization in Texas. I'm very proud of that because we have focused on principles. And that's what we're doing with our signature project now. Our premier project is the Texas Conservative Grassroots Coalition. I started thinking about that right after I came off the campaign trail with Senator Cruz for his presidential run. And I started thinking about what the political landscape would look like for the future and how we could engage conservative Texans, everyday men and women whose mission in life is to just live free and minimize the imprint of government on their families and on their businesses. I think that's what we want. And so in doing that, I thought, well, let's try something new. Let's try a great experiment here. And one of the first experiments we did with the coalition, and by the way, the definition of a coalition is a group of people who agree on an issue, and they get together and they try to solve the problem. Are you all kind of sick and tired of the people that just like to keep problems around to raise money on? And y'all, those of you who don't know me, I'm very blunt about things. After you've been doing this for 27 years and you no longer do some of the things that you like to do, like go fishing, you kind of get to the point where you don't feel like you need to dance around the edge of a pen or an issue. You just go right for the heart of it. So let me just say this. You know, our mission is to advance and to preserve and advance liberty, because liberty is under assault everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. And so what we've done with the coalition is we've put together, and you've got a cheat sheet at your place that explains to you what the coalition is about and what it's not. It doesn't. We don't try to take the place of any other organization. I'm not in competition with anybody. I'm trying to inspire people to where they live, be effective in the fight for freedom, and that means limiting government. Even those noble ideas that somehow engage your wallet. You need to learn how to ask questions. And so this coalition is a diverse group of people from state Republican Executive Committee members, Tea Party leaders, independent conservatives, anybody that loves freedom and can agree on one issue is welcome to sign on to some of our projects. The last session, we were very successful. If any of you all know about the Warren Buffett bill, we killed that bill. We killed that bill, and if you don't know the story, Robert won't let me tell that because it'll go too long. But we made national news on that, because I got to tell you, I am tired of people who have bazillions of dollars leapfrogging over citizens who work their guts out to get conservative reforms passed out of committee, and then somebody blows into town and thinks they're going to get a carve-out bill. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. So uniting people around principles rather than personalities is very important, because politicians come and go. Principles, conservative, limited government principles, should never change. We should point people toward principles rather than personalities, and stay out of the social media sandbox where you just bicker with people who don't want to be informed anyway. I mean, there's a place for social media. I have somebody that we hired that takes care of it, because JoAnn doesn't play in the social media sandbox. I don't. When I say something, I want to be heard. I don't want to blend into the background noise. So I can tell you that being empowering people means giving them the kind of training they need. We have Rachel Malone. I think I saw Rachel back there. We have people like Rachel Malone is going to be Untitled, and she's going to be teaching people how to testify in front of committee hearings. You know, that's important, because it's scary for a lot of people to get in front of elected officials. While it might not scare me one little bit, it scares other people. So we need to empower people, teach them how to embrace the principles. Give them the tools they need to act out on those principles, and then we can all live in a free Texas. Thank you all.
Well, we'll certainly be getting back to you, JoAnn, because I know that you're just getting started. So, all right, Mr. Bray, you're up. Just tell us a little bit about yourself a little bit more, and obviously the very exciting experiences you had during the campaign for the re-elect for Senator Cruz.
All right, well, it's good to see everybody out there. I'm not going to take a lot of time talking about what I do and who I am. I really want to get into the concept, so I'm going to tell you this. If you have a pen and paper, it's going to be awesome today. We're not going to waste your time, and if you have a phone on you, please put it on notes, because you're going to hear a lot of stuff that you want to take back to wherever it is that you've come from. So my name is R.W. Bray. I have the privilege of living in Houston, Texas, and I'm originally from Louisiana. I'm from the boot, baby. And I came here during Katrina. I have friends in the audience, so I'm going to try and behave. So you're not going to see a lot of New Orleans come out of me. But what you will see I think is a lot of energy based on this concept of engagement. And I'm really glad you're here because there is a huge difference between outreach and engagement. And this concept needs to be defined like today. And what better place than here? And so I hope that you really listen to these different concepts and the difference between the two and how we can utilize these two to move forward our party. Let me just two experiences, right? So I'm not going to take a lot of time.
No, go take all the
One
time
of
you
the
want.
great experiences I had was, and this is just a concept of engagement, is having the ability to work with Senator Ted Cruz. Look, one of the most conservative lions in Congress was open to this idea of engagement. And I really didn't know whether or not there was a candidate of any size that would be willing to do the work that it would take. But Senator Cruz was very interested in this concept, and he added it to his campaign. We had a blast. But let me just tell you one experience that was a blast, because after this is over, I can tell you the thousands of experiences we had. I'm on the official side, so you're gonna hear me talk a lot about what I do on the campaign side. My boss is in the room too. So, but here's the incredible thing. Here's a concept. This is an idea. Any of you guys watched Senator Ted Cruz shellac Jimmy Kimmel on television? Yeah. All right, great. So I'm glad you're clapping for it, but it was the best example of two grown men that cannot play a lick of ball. Go at it like tigers, right? And what was crazy is 7,000 people showed up to see this folly, and they enjoyed themselves. Here's the most incredible thing about this, though. Now just take a step back and put your conservative hat on for a minute. Bible talks about us being as shrewd as snakes, and what it really means is understand the way the world works, right? How to transform somebody's mind without realizing they're being affected. Well, Ted Cruz challenged Jimmy after he talked a lot of smack. Ted comes back along with Brian English and like, where can we do this at? Why not in HBCU? Anyone in the audience knows how many HBCUs are in Texas or what it even stands for? HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. How many do we have in the state of Texas, brother? Negative. We have 8. There is no other state in the union can say that they have that many because we are the most. We have the most. Period. End of story. 8 of the most historical black colleges and universities in America are in Texas. Let it sink in for a minute. That's how powerful Texas is. That's the opportunity that is out there. So we played ball at an HBCU, and no one expected it to happen. But then we trumped that, though. No pun intended. So then we trumped that. And we did it not at an HBCU, but we did it in the hood. We did it in the 3rd Ward. Anyone familiar with the 3rd Ward? You had better be packing, babe. You're in 3rd Ward. We did it in the 3rd Ward. That surprised everyone. But then we trumped it again. Not only is Ted Cruz, the most conservative lion in the Congress, going to play ball in the hood at an HBCU in the 3rd Ward, he's going to raise money. Then we raise money for an inner city charter school. An inner city charter school. Here's the trump of that. The charter school was 90% African American. Sink that in for a minute. Let it hit. And in particular, charter school sits right in the middle of a project. The PJs. They set the school in the middle of the PJs. And it was created by a white Republican. I call him White Chocolate. He's a powerful man. He was very ambitious. But Ted decided he would raise money for NCAA charter school. Understand the psychology behind what we're talking about. We all know that the concept of zoning, in many cases, can be criminalization of mothers who simply want better education for their children. They lie on applications, and they'll say that their child lives with their auntie, right? Knowing full well that they don't. What happens to that woman who happens to be a single black male, female, or single black Latino who's just trying to get a better education because the current education school they're going to is horrible? They didn't penalize that individual and make them a criminal. And I had one situation where that individual had a young girl who was bused back to her area. That is the definition of enslavement. That's the definition of corralling humans like animals. Every conservative in here needs to be indignant about changing that. And this so happened, we had Senator Ted Cruz that was adamant about doing it. So we played ball, put the shellacking on Jimmy, shut him up, and we raised $80,000 for a charter school. split between Texas Children, which is an awesome nonprofit, well known, but no one knew who Generation 1 was. Now they do. So we put $40,000 toward Generation 1. You know what their annual budget is? Like they just hope to get? They just hope to get. Anybody? Any takers? Yeah, $250,000. They just hope to get it, right? They typically somewhere around $100,000 a year. Isn't that sad? And in one game, we were able to raise $40,000. That's the power behind engagement. So I'm gonna tell you more later because I really want to get into the concept. But I want you guys to really start seeing where I'm gonna go when I say certain things, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
Listen, the one thing I know about my brother Bray here is that when he gets on the roll, he gets on the roll. So let's stay with you just a little bit, if that's all right. Take a sip of water and keep preaching. So let's delve a little bit more into the concepts of the terminologies of what is in reach, what is outreach, and actually what is engagement. So if you want to go on off that a little bit, and then we'll pick up the panelists.
All right, you got a pen and paper, you have to just jot this down, please. All right, listen. Here's a simple formula that we can all move off of. It's very simple. We all want our party to grow. We all want conservative principles to be the staple for Texas, right? I'm sorry, I'm in the Air Force, 17 years. All right, so we all want that. Here's the way we can achieve party growth, conservative principles being the standard and the staple for Texas. Think about this. We have emotional data plus factual data. Put that down. Divided by rebranding. And rebranding for our population, rebranding for our party is a necessity. Don't let anyone tell you that it isn't, right? We know that now. There's no way in heaven that Ted Cruz should have inked by in Texas. There's no way. No way. Since when did we depend on West Texas to bring us through any election? We've never depended on West Texas to bring us through it. Now we were praying and hoping that we did. Any of you were sitting in your living room looking at the numbers that night? I know I was. Imagine the war room. Listen, it was so quiet you can hear a rat pee on cotton. Here's how we knew, though. Here's how we knew that there was hope. We weren't moved by all the high-powered counties coming in. We were moved the moment we saw that West Texas and Panhandle was holding us down, and we won. But here is the deal, though. Here's the positive deal. We learned something that day. And what we learned was, and this is amazing, rebranding. Anyone knows how many black male votes, as far as percentages, Ted Cruz got? So I'm praying, right, at this table that I'm in, and Ted Cruz's best friend calls me over. He says, Bray, you got to come see this. I come to see what's going on, and this guy says, Bray, Ted Cruz has 17% of the black male vote. I said, man, refresh. You're lying. Just refresh this. Refresh it all. 17% black male vote. And so he says, Bray, whatever we're doing, we got to keep doing it. Every candidate needs to do it. And it's truth. Anytime we start rebranding, we have to start redefining how we engage individuals on their level. Forget about being colorblind, be color aware, and understand the differences. So we start rebranding, divided by rebranding, times multiplied by engagement. And I'll talk about engagement later. And then what we'll have is a party growth. And here's how we get there. 5 E's, all right? And I'm going to shut up.
You go.
5
E's,
all right? Check this out. 5 E's, please write it down. It's very simple for any candidate. Take this back to any candidate and any individual that wants to engage in any organization, right? So 5. This is how we're going to move our party when it comes to engagement. There are other different ways we can do it. But here's how we do it with engagement. Number 1, empowerment. We'll talk about that later. Empowerment. Number 2, enterprise. Write that down, enterprise. Number 3, entrepreneurship. Number 4, education. And number 5, environment. Ultimately, all these 5 will affect and positively affect our economics here in Texas, but also spread our message in a way that is very shrewd, but very effective. And we will do this if we can just home in on these 5 E's, and I'm sure we'll have more questions where I can dive into that. What you'll see is a dichotomy, is a change in the mindset of how people think when it comes to minorities. And the powerful thing is that these marginalized communities are full with individuals with concepts and ideas and values that are the same and aligned with us. We've just done a poor job of branding ourselves and bringing that message. If we stick to these 5 E's, they become gravitos because they make sense. I'll end with this. One of the most powerful populations that we have right now are African American males between the age of 23 and 36. You know why? All of them are looking to be entrepreneurs. One of the most powerful populations right now in America, the most growing demographic of entrepreneurs is black females becoming millionaires. Now, you think they want to keep their money in their pocket? You bet they do, and so do conservatives. So we'll talk more.
That's absolutely right. So now you know why I invited Brother Bray here to be with us all today. So, and he's got more good stuff there in his pocket. So, but it really is going back to the essence of why we're all here. It's all about liberty and opportunity. You heard it from him, from Bray himself. That's what the folks, not only in the neighborhoods, in the barrios, but all across Texas and quite honestly all across the country and all across the world for that matter, it's all about liberty and opportunity. That's what people need to thrive. And that is why we are all here, and that's what we're all looking to advance, either through policy or the mechanics of how it actually gets done. JoAnn, you want to pick up a little bit on what Bray was putting down?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Well, you know, there's 2 types of engagement. There's engaging people to get them involved in the political process. But there's also engaging your elected officials, because after all, what are we here for? We go and we work very hard to get people hired at the ballot box. You know, you hire people to do a job. And in my private sector career, I could tell you it didn't take me 90 days to figure out if I needed to let somebody go on down the highway or not. But you know, with elected officials, you need to make sure that the same people who have you on speed dial during a campaign don't forget who you are when they get to the governing part. And I will tell you that there is nothing that makes me angrier. So any elected official that's seeing this, nothing makes me angrier than to see grassroots activist leaders, the people who give it all, the people who are not paid to do anything, to be disrespected by elected officials and their staff. And if somebody wants to get on the bad side of me, you just let me be aware of that. Because I'm going to tell you what, you know, Ted Cruz's organization, what was very important about having the kind of senator that Ted's always been. He's been an elected official that stayed in touch with his grassroots leaders. Because I told him the first time I talked to him, and then after he went through the vetting process and we decided we were going to support him, I told him, I said, the thing that you cannot allow to happen to you is to surround yourself with people who are going to convince you that you don't need to listen to what the people back home are saying. And I'm not talking about the people that write the big checks. I'm talking about the people that live out government tyranny in their communities. And so that is extremely important. And so teaching people in the engagement process how to engage your elected officials is, you know, it's one of those jobs that takes a long time. But I can tell you that the point of everything we do in outreach and engagement on the citizen activist side is to tell them, you got to know your subject. That's why we provide all the training on policy. We have TPPF is coming to talk about property tax reform and education reform at our summit this weekend. And so I look for the best of the best to not only explain to people, this is the problem, here's the solution, and help you understand it so you can articulate it to your elected officials. because it is a reasonable expectation that we hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do during the job interview. Okay? It's reasonable to expect them to do it and give them a chance to do it and have their back. Now, here's the other thing. Make sure that you are getting your information and then you check it out to make sure if it's true. Because there are people that'll start a fight among conservatives because they really don't want the problem solved. I mean, that's the people that want to keep raising money off the issue, right? And they want conservatives, they want Republicans fighting amongst themselves. Now, if we can all agree on a principle and we can go solve a problem, let's do that one at a time. But let's listen to our elected officials, and if we believe they've screwed up, go ask them about it. Have the conversation. I always tell activists, never have the only tool in your toolbox to be a hammer. By the time you see JoAnn take out a hammer,
That's his problem.
I have used every other opportunity to try to settle a matter one-to-one with the elected official. And if they want to just go on and be stupid about something, we'll just have a hammer time. Right? Because, if I get 17 teams of people to go to Iowa for Ted Cruz, I want those same people heard. And Senator Cruz and his staff do a good job of that. And if he doesn't, I'll let him know about it.
If I may, Rafa.
So I'll get to you in a second, George. I know you're chomping at the bit too. So what you're hearing is elections are important, no doubt. But what's the purpose of elections? The purpose of elections is to make sure that we get the appropriate leaders elected so that we can enact the policies that we all want and need for our society to prosper and grow under freedom and liberty. We can't check out after the election. That's what these folks are saying. We need to be involved. We need to continue to be engaged in the process, because when election time is over, that's just half the battle. The battle's just starting. The real true battle happens at the governing stage, and making sure that the leaders that were put in during the election process hear why we actually put them there. So, George, you want to pick up, on the conversation?
Definitely. Rafa mentioned this in the beginning about common sense, and the panel has mentioned about respect. I grew up in a Christian home where I was taught to respect everyone, especially your elders, and honor your parents. And that's the same for everyone. Volunteers and activists, they're not beneath us. They're our equals, and they're our lifeblood of our organization. So it's common sense. We shouldn't put them beneath us. We need to respect them. We need to get to know who they are, invest our time in them. It's important. It's as simple as just how I say it, but for some reason, it doesn't always get across. It's important because these are individuals that will remember that one time I went to this organization and they treated me so well. And I've heard it before, I come here because I feel welcomed, because I feel like I belong. And we don't tell people, you're going to come here as a grassroots organization. We do a lot of phone banking and canvassing door to door. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's what we do. We don't tell all our volunteers, all right, you're going to hit the phones and you're going to hit the doors. Everyone has a different quality, a different skill. Someone may have that internal barrier of getting on the phone with someone, or maybe someone doesn't want to walk. You need to find out, what are you good at? What would you like to do in our organization, in our campaign? That's very important, because you're going to see your community grow. And if we look at community as a key institution of our society, it's very important to have that healthy community, because when you have a healthy community, that means you have a healthy Texas, because we're all contributing and volunteering our time. So I think it's very important to note those key issues.
Absolutely.
So, and picking up on that, so obviously we're talking now about legislative issue campaigns, right? And if I don't make that disclaimer, I know that the TPPF lawyers are going to come and hound me. So, and to kind of break away from a little bit of the political stories that that we've been talking about. But there's a lot of similarity between the two. The end goal is different. Obviously, you know, in a political election, you're looking to elect an official, somebody who's going to be your representative. In the legislative issue campaign, we're actually looking to promote a physical issue and trying to get through a body and get it approved into law. But a lot of the same concepts apply between the political campaign and a legislative campaign. And I want to just stay just for a minute on the difference between, on the mechanics, on the difference between in-reach, outreach, and engagement, because there really is a difference there. So the way that I see it, and I like to get the feedback from the panel, is when you're doing in-reach, if people aren't really familiar with these terms, in-reach, I feel, is talking to those people who would normally be your friends and allies, people who are already sympathetic to the general issue that you want to move, but they need to be mobilized. That's in-reach. Outreach is a little bit more people that may not be familiar with the issue, people that you haven't had any contact with whatsoever, and that's more kind of like pioneering, so that's outreach. Engagement, as Bray was saying, that's something that's more of a long-term investment, and I know that all three of the panelists have been very heavily involved in all three aspects. So if you want to give just a little bit more examples of how that works, JoAnn, let's pick up with you. JoAnn, let's pick up with you.
Okay. Well, on the issue of defining, for example, on a coalition approach, and I'm going to stick with that because it's important to me to get people to focus on what they can agree on, as opposed to fighting all the time over what they don't agree on. Okay? Because if we're going to be problem solvers, first of all, in the in-reach part, you have to realize that you may not have 100% agreement on something. So what we've done with the coalition is we knew that there were two issues, and I'm not going to talk about them today. There were two issues that I knew from working with a wide array of conservative grassroots leaders, that there were two issues that we weren't going to address right off the reel. So you look for things that people have a common interest in, they identify as a problem. You unite them, they're informed on principles, you teach them how to apply principles to policy issues. In other words, you identify the problem, then what is the conservative limited government solution to that problem? And so as you do outreach, you have to use that same concept with people. For example, if you look in your community and there's a big issue going on, and I'll just go ahead and pick one that's going on in our community, and that is the Commissioner's Court decided they were going to steal the vacation time from detention officers. That's a very tough job to have. And so when you start addressing policy issues like that, when people stop you or you go out and you're invited to speak on a topic and they raise that issue, try to help people identify personally with the complication that this issue is having for someone else. Help them to identify personally, because people remember stories, right? I'm a policy wonk. I can talk to you about policy and get in the weeds on policy until I make you want to go cry, please stop. Because details are important to me, because I know the devil is always in the details, and sometimes there's unintended consequences for legislation and for policies, right? And then we all have to go around trying to get it fixed after we've messed up. So those details are important, but know your audience. You have to know your audience. Are they ready to hear those kinds of details? And if they're not, when you're doing outreach, as RW was talking about, you have to catch people where they live, what matters to them. Because, most parents care about saving their kids from the wolves that are at the door. They want their kids to have a good education. But the education industrial complex cares about preserving the institution instead of those kids' lives. And I had this conversation with a friend, a longtime friend, before I came in here today. I said, every day a child sits in a failing school is a day that their future grows dimmer. That's just true. I mean, we've been talking about education reform for the 27 years I've been back in Texas. We haven't moved the needle. We haven't. But if we talk about it in terms of people's lives, real people's lives, who in the world wants to sit by and understand that people's lives are being destroyed? People are not going to have the opportunities that we had. I think you have to use where people live to capture their hearts, right? So that they will hear you on other things. The other part of this is, as with in-reach and outreach, if you just want to go yelling at people all the time and calling them names, I just got to tell you, as a former elected official, if somebody called me up and decided they were going to cuss me out, do you think that made me hear them faster? Do you? You know, people who have just a little bit of information on an issue, then they go run with it and they go set everybody on fire, and you don't get any problems solved. So I try to tell people, know your topic. Know how to talk to people about the topic. Get them on your side. And the outreach with elected officials, if you want to go clothesline them in public, in the social media sandbox, you want to just riddle them with bullets. You just see how fast they're going to listen to you. Now, that goes back to the hammer. There's a time and place to do that, okay? There's a time and place. But before that, there's talking and trying to find common ground. And if anybody says that's a liberal concept, I will tell you that winning matters and you have to listen to other people, right?
Bray, you want to jump in?
Yeah, in reach, outreach. Let me just talk to everybody like we're family for a minute, and get extremely real about in reach. The truth is, if we're honest about in reach and outreach, we've been really lazy. We've been really lazy. The proof of that is the elections that we've seen and how close they've been. We've taken for granted Texas in a lot, and we forget that so goes Texas, so goes America. It's become cliche, but it's true. And the proof of that was that they sent a bulldog to Texas, and in the shape of a mouse, Beto O'Rourke. And no one saw this guy coming as quickly as he did, but he did very quickly. And all of a sudden we saw Cali, New York, and everybody getting really jazzed up about this guy that's skateboarding with absolutely no principles at all, just sold out the fact that this cat was cool. Guys, that's what happens when we don't think for ourselves and we allow for our neighbors and our friends and our county to get really jazzed up about absolutely nothing. This guy was far left of Nancy Pelosi, and we were still talking about making him a state senator. Guys, get indignant. In reach is about being indignant about something. And here's a real example why I told you guys to really calm down with me for a minute and talk as family. How did we get here? All of this started with political power. And here's an example. You only lost the black community and Latino community back when LBJ came around. That's when we lost them. Until that point, man, we had families that were full. We had women who had no problem raising their kids with their husbands. We had men in their homes on both sides of the house. We had a nucleus. We had some sort of principle. We had black business owners. We had Latino business owners. LBJ comes around and he says something, one of the most powerful things ever. I'm going to have these black folks, and he didn't use black folks, voting Democrat for 200 years. What did he mean? It means he was methodical. He knew, I'm going to give these cats milk. It'd be hard to get rid of cats. I'm from Louisiana. When you keep feeding them milk, they won't go away. So my grandmother would tell me, stop feeding them cats milk. Then I realized these cats wouldn't be popped up in my house anymore. Now, he knew he needed to be methodical, so he started giving. And what happens? You become very loyal because you forget how to fish because someone's already giving you fish. That's right. Taking away very methodically our humanity. And conservatives, the people who at one point in their lives were abolitionists, who talked about freedom and returning humanity to people, backed off from it. Yeah, this does sound good. No, it doesn't. What they created was a loyal group of voting blocks. It was no different than slavery. The only difference is they wasn't harvesting cotton, they were harvesting votes, and they do it every campaign. Yes, they do. Why aren't conservatives more indignant about this? How do we affect it? When it comes to in-reach, we need to remind people of our beginnings. Remind people of how this all started. Because now you have the consequence of this methodical approach, political approach. Remember, it happened politically. The methodical approach of that is you have 95, 96% of African Americans voting Democrat consistently across America. We have 1,000 people a day moving to Texas, and we're still talking about containment. No, we even start talking about engagement. And the only for us to do that, because I don't know where these folks are coming, but they are not us. And proof of that is in the last election. Proof of that is in the last election. Now, when it comes to outreach, the powerful thing about outreach is that what he was talking about is perfect. When you have someone that is coming to your area to do block walking or phone banking or whatever that case is, here's a cool thing about outreach and why I talked about emotional data over rebranding is, yeah, you got a single mom coming, she's fired up about getting on the phones, and you give her a precinct. That's great. But we have enough factual, emotional data now to take that single mom and give her a list of nothing but single moms to call. Yeah. Forget the precincts. Just get somebody to get really fired up about emotion. Yeah. So one of the cool things, I know you practice this, we have certain areas where, if it's a black area, then we make sure that the individuals that are walking are either Latino or black, and all that makes sense, right? That you have people who are going into those areas that look like them. Because let's face it, that we have a stereotype in our party. But if you take a look at this party, we have all ages, all colors, and we have all races, and yet we are still stereotyped, right? And so it makes sense. Believe it or not, this is psychology. There was a poll that was taken. Did you know that majority of the black populace actually trust white females over white males in the areas of education and nurturing and environment? Did anyone know that? And it all came from actually they used to believe that that when back in the day when these white women were actually taking slave children and teaching them in private. They would actually teach them in private, regardless of what the masters thought. They would teach them in private, and all of a sudden they became very beholden to these white women, right? And through the years, people like Harriet B. Stowe and people like Nancy Reagan, right, made all these great moves. Suddenly they won the hearts and the minds of these black people. You think about Nancy Reagan in the black community, she's raised up as a pillar, right? Nancy was a Republican. Let's start thinking about how we can go back to using that psychology behind having these powerful white conservative women who are making moves in these areas because you already have the trust. And lastly, I'll end with this. White men in the areas of enterprise and economics are seen as leaders. You go to any entrepreneur, black entrepreneur's office, likelihood, there's 36 to 40% likelihood you have in his office you have a picture of Steve Jobs. What's crazy is that these individuals, when you think about psychology of individuals, you have a boatload of entrepreneurs, whether they're black, Latino, or white, who look up to these incredible white men who have made a difference in America, who happen to have been conservative. So now if a white guy comes in talking about education, they'll probably say, man, this dude don't know what he's talking about. But if he sees a white woman, he's like, oh man, this white woman, she's really cool. So you play with the psychology of the way America has been birthed and never forget the in-reach part, because the in-reach part all started with politics, and I'm hell-bent on making sure that LBJ is wrong.
Yeah, that's good.
So we're almost out of time. I definitely want to go into a little bit of question and answers because I know that there's plenty. But before we do that, I just want to quickly, and I don't want to be remiss, obviously we're going into Texas legislative session, and if I can ask you, JoAnn, and you, George, what some of your legislative priorities are looking for the upcoming session. JoAnn?
Lasting, enduring property tax reform. Not playing around the edges, and that means you're going to have to fix school finance. And I think there's a way that we can do it that invokes and requires accountability. Because I got to tell you what, we're not. If you look at the TEA report that says about 20% of graduating students are college ready, that's not even mediocre, folks. So, and I will tell you that constitutional carry is important to us. The pro-life issues are important to us. It's a range of issues that we have posted on our website. And I can tell you that accountability, ending taxpayer-funded lobbying, the very idea that we have local officials, and I've told our local officials, you need to just stop talking about how the state's being mean and onerous and tyrannical, trying to rein in rogue local government. Because, you know, you have to tell these people, we did a thing this week, Civics 101, explaining to them about how local government came to be, and that the state created it. And so the state has a moral obligation to rein in local government when it's trampling on the rights of the people. So you know, there is a whole range of issues. There are some things that I call squandered opportunities, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this. We have been saying there are transportation reforms. I see Terry Hall out there. Transportation reforms. We've been telling our conservative brand, RW, we've been telling our conservative brand that you're passing all the easy exits off of this big government highway if you don't get to business while you have a supermajority. Well, we've had some squandered opportunities. So we're looking for people to do what they said they would do. And we're happy to just touch a little bit because part of the legislative process is the new speaker. We are happy to give Speaker Bonnet, and I told him this face-to-face in Tyler, happy to give him an opportunity to establish his own brand of House leadership. I'm not going to smack down on top of him, anybody else. I'm going to gauge him on what he said he would do and how he runs the House. And we're happy to engage with him on issues that we agree on, right? But we have to keep our promises to people, because it doesn't matter how much we do with the in-reach, the outreach, and all that. If we don't keep our promises to the people, then that makes us part of the problem, right? If we cover up for people who don't keep their promises, that's why I preach all the time. You've got to have one measuring stick for every elected official, even the ones that you really like a lot. And I really tell you that you really ought not let them know you like them that much sometimes. Respect them, but don't be a buddy, all right? Because even the ones that you like a lot, you have to hold them accountable to the same standard that you do a legislator from down in the valley or wherever, right? Because if you don't use the same measurement for everybody else, you have no credibility.
George, what's LIBRE and AFP doing for the session?
Yeah, well, we are going to be focusing on property tax reform, and we're hoping to get that done. We've been fighting for this for a few years now, a few sessions. 56% of U.S. Hispanics own a home here. And all of us here who are property owners, or whether we rent, I mean, we're paying into this. And a lot of people are paying too much rent to the government, and we can never get out. And a lot of people are actually getting priced out of their homes. So that's something we're going to be engaging on. We have our volunteers who will every day be phone banking and canvassing for these issues. And the other is a rollback on the franchise tax. We were successful in, I believe it was 2015, to roll back a cut of 25%. And we're hoping that those two, if not definitely the property tax reform. And the other issue that LIBRE has always been engaged on is education opportunity, school choice, don't know what's going to happen with that, but those are our issues.
Great. So I know everybody's jumping at the bit. I just want to also give, since we're putting on this little show, make sure that you all know what our priorities are for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And if you've heard me speak, I've been out there promoting our Texas Prosperity Promise, and that consists of course, property tax reform, school finance reform, and educational opportunity, making sure that we have a conservative budget and we're not spending more than we have, putting an end to taxpayer-funded lobbying. That is something that has caught wildfire all across the state. People get it, and we need to get rid of it. And then also trying to restore American civics and American history into our classrooms, something that is sorely needed. So that is, and obviously we'll be working on a whole host of other issues, but those are going to be our priorities. So now let's open up for questions. Adriana first, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for Rasuali, for your passion. JoAnn, thank you for saying that we need to speak in common ground. But Jorge and Rafa, I do want to bring a question for you. Thank you for both of you. Spanish-speaking engagement. You didn't talk about that, and those of you, you know me, but those of you who don't know me, I am a political analyst in the 3 top Spanish-speaking networks in the nation, Telemundo, CNN Spanish, and Univision, and I'm also the director of Hispanic engagement of the Republican Party of Texas. But speaking as adrianaaldin.com, I want you, either one of you, to point how important is if by 2020, 43 million of people in the United States are going to be Spanish-speaking people, even though I encourage everybody to learn English. How important is that in Texas we interact with those people and engaging them in their mother language because they need to understand policy so they can vote their values?
Let me take a crack at it first, George. So obviously I've been working in this field for almost all my life. And I will say this, I think that whereas that's important, there's a time and place for that. And I think, imparting the message of liberty and freedom should be done in all languages, no matter what the language is. But if we're really looking to focus on people who are voters and who are going to be active, that is going to be in English. So the primary language of that communication must be, by necessity, must be English. Now, at the same time, there is a lot of merit and a lot of value of making sure that that message of freedom and liberty gets put out in all the other languages, whether that's Spanish or Vietnamese or Chinese or what have you, that doesn't matter. And those messages still need to go out. But where the communication really has to happen, and now we're not really talking in reach, right? Because we're not preaching to the choir here. We're looking to try to get more adherence to liberty and freedom, and that is outreach and long-term engagement. Is that we need to start with those people that are actually able to vote. And most of that is already going to happen in English by default. So yes, there is an appropriate place for the dissemination of that information in Spanish or whatever other language, but primarily we need to do a lot more of that communication in those areas, right, in the barrios and everywhere. But a lot of that's going to happen in English by default. So next question. Let me go to Edward, and then I'll work my way around the room.
Thank you. I have a timely question. I'm Edward Retta, and I'm Vice Chair of Hispanic Engagement for Dallas County Republican Party. There's a timely issue. First, I want to give a fact. There are research surveys that have been done, and among the Hispanic population of the United States, the language preference for media consumption, I have research, I'll get to the question, only 14% of all Hispanics in the U.S. prefer their media consumption in Spanish. My question is about Fort Worth. we have something happening there. It's the Muslim doctor, and I believe in an audience like this, we all care about hearing from experts like you all some rational and adult and principled conversation around this issue. Thank you.
Any one of the panelists want to take a crack at that? As I look toward Bray. Go ahead.
Is that brother's name again? Bold question. Sensitive question. Yeah. See how quiet it is? Here's the deal. I'm all about engagement, obviously. I think that regardless of what your religious background is, I believe that republicanism, the concept of republicanism, is not based on race, it's not based on religion. Conservatism, however, has a big religious portion, and I think that that has to be respected. And so when I look at what happened with this individual, I feel like the conversation should be wrapped around what is republicanism and what is conservatism, and how do we indoctrinate and respectfully our religious beliefs into both of those, right? So I'm more interested in the outcome than I am what the person's religion is. If the outcome is moral, right? If the outcome is based on the principles that I believe in, I'm gonna be okay with an individual being a Muslim and having some form of leadership. However, I'm not an advocate on the area of conservatism, only because that's my personal preference and the way I view some of the Muslim community and what has happened to America from there. So I think if we're going to have the conversation, we have to get a real conversation with people who are offended by, because the thing about Muslims is that, and them talking from having been deployed, there's no barrier between politics and religion with them. It's all one. We can do that. We can do that. With Americans, we can separate the two. So if you're talking about a different animal, we're not comparing apples to oranges. We're talking to someone who's going to believe by nature that their principles, their religion is also their politics. That's not an American way. And so if you have anyone who just doesn't believe that those two should be meshed together, you're going to get some kickback from the Republican Party. And I tell my Muslim friends, listen, if you're going to be Muslim, you got to understand, America, most of Americans and Republicans are not going to stand for their politics and their religion to be one. They're going to advocate that you can bring your principles to the table, but if you can't separate those two, it's going to be very hard for you to talk to a conservative Republican, period.
Very well said. All right, let's see. Chris, let me go on this side, and then I'll come back over here. Sir.
Hello, y'all. Chris McDonald, serve on the SREC and conservative activist in Harris County. I'm proud of you, my brother Bray. Good job, my friend. Question comes up regarding the myth or theory of party switching, and that is in that you go into the black community and they say, well, the Republican and Democrat Party switched. They're not the same as they were then. I've even seen a conservative on social media, to wit Jerry Patterson, buy into this theory of the party switch. Could you speak to how the party switch came to be, that theory, and what we can do to counter it when we're engaging with black people in our community?
There's no way in the world I can go into that, you know full well, but I really appreciate that question. But obviously, it's the myth is the Southern strategy, right? You guys are familiar with that. And we recognize this is the myth. Here's how I debunk the myth, right? And we can talk about this offline. But the real simple fact of the matter is, long before the 60s, people forget that we were already talking about civil rights. And here's another fact. Senator Eric Dirksen, you guys remember that guy? Senator Eric Dirksen is the only reason why the 64 Act ever even happened. That's it. He was a Republican. LBJ could not get it through without Dirksen. Matter of fact, he was on the cover of Time. Remember that? He was the champion. And everyone thinks that LBJ did that by himself. No, it was a white Republican. And we forget about 58. We forget about 60. Conservatives were already pushing civil rights, and Democrats were already shooting it down. Matter of fact, LBJ had shot it down consecutively 8 years through the whole time process. So when you're debunking the fools that actually believe that this dude was a champion for civil rights, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of white people just decided they would turn Republican, you can debunk that very easily. I would say the most convicting thing, though, and just food for thought, guys, think about the Southern strategy and why it should make conservatives indignant is you have a lot of white liberals who are riding off of conservative principles with no one to debate them. You see, here's the positive thing about Hollywood liberals and white liberals. They can put Republicans down and make them demons and set themselves up as angels while receiving the benefits of conservatives, of conservative principles, with no one questioning. The same tax breaks that we fight for Republicans, rich white liberals get. But do you see them in the streets? No. If you do, they're talking about social issues, so now they look like champions. The truth is that somehow Republicans have to call out the white liberals who are benefiting from all of the principles that actually matter politically, because they do. They're just quiet about it, and then call them out for what it really is. The truth is that traditional values and conservative principles still work today, and they can talk about Southern strategy all day, but it's about me believing in a unicorn.
All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions. Over here, please.
Mr. Bray, thank you so much for volunteering or coming to El Paso. I am from El Paso, the land of Beto. I want to tell you, all 3 of you, that El Paso is a conservative city. And this is a challenge for all 3 of you. I didn't know LIBRE existed. I never knew that you all went to my hometown. I am a native of El Paso. I am the populace that the Republican Party wants to reach. I am politics 101, but I see the urgency of conservatives getting involved and speaking out. El Paso is conservative. I'm here to tell you we are a friendly town. When you came to El Paso, was it a shock that we filled that gym?
I love El Paso.
But it was a shock to everybody, but it wasn't to El Pasoans. So I'm here to challenge you. Which one of you and your organizations will come to my native town?
Let's talk afterwards.
So I think that's a very
Absolutely.
gracious invitation that you just invited all of us, and I hope you have enough tacos and tamales for all of us. So, but definitely, I know. Well, LIBRE is already there. In fact, you have a staffer there, Carla Sierra. So, and then we've already spoken, and we want TPPF to go out there. So, thank you so much. And I know JoAnn will be more than interested in speaking to you as well. One last question over here, sir.
So there was a lot of talk about rebranding the Republican Party, and I think everybody here would agree that that's something that's absolutely essential to the long-term survival of the party, especially here in Texas. What I'd like to ask is, how should the party best go about doing that at a time when the national image is tied to a historically unpopular and uniquely unpopular president?
Yeah. So let me handle that, if you don't mind. And we kind of got a little bit off topic. That question is a much more partisan question, and we really can't deal with that specific question the way that it's phrased, because obviously we're a 501c3, and we're really here to focus on legislative issues as opposed to something of a more partisan nature. I mean, although I personally, sympathize with you, that's not really a question that we can answer directly. I think that if I may take the liberty a little bit to kind of rephrase that, is stripping the party label off of it, how can conservatives and how can conservative values and how can conservative issues be rebranded? So perhaps if we take the question that way, that might be something a little bit more interesting. And phrased that way, I think it's more appropriate. Yes, JoAnn,
Yes,
you want to go?
Well, I can tell you that changing the definition of conservative, changing the definition of Republican, changing the definition of what liberty is not the way to go about this. If we decide we're going to let the left and the establishment, whether it's your local cartel, your Austin cartel, or your DC cartel, and the special interest, redefine you, you're letting somebody describe what your role is. I think people who fight for liberty need to learn how to express it to people and make it real to them. Explain how liberty, because, for example, I heard this week that all the people that are leaving California, and based on the things that they've been doing this week, more will be leaving, coming here, that are looking for a better way of life in Texas, are not understanding how the policies that they've supported all along the way ended up giving them a government they can no longer afford. So if they come here looking for the Santa Claus approach to government in Texas, they're going to run up against some resistance there, but it's also going to dovetail into what RW was talking about here with these very thin margins. We have to be able to explain to people, this is why too much government is going to be bad for your family, bad for your small business, bad for your entrepreneurial dreams. You have to be free to be able to live out what you want to do. So for me, for having liberal talking heads and, well, you know, the pundits that want to redefine what Republicans are, whether they're left of center or right of center, I don't believe in letting other people chart your course for you. If you know what liberty looks like, you ought to be able to explain it to people. I don't believe in ceding the language to the left.
There you go. There you have it, and I absolutely agree. It's not really an issue of rebranding. It's what we've been talking about, the whole discussion that we've had, is we need to do a better job in communicating what that is to the new people, and we cannot allow the new neo-leftists and the new neo-socialists come out and create a brand new, brave new world, very scary brave new world on our watch. So thank you all for participating. Thank you so much for the panelists.